very quick, rough tutorial just to show you how to add smoke or clouds to an image without having to do selections to delete the backgrounds. This assumes that the image that you're going to put these on has light and dark areas because that affects how the blends happen. It also assumes that if you're working with smoke, that you're working with a photograph of smoke that was made against a black background or very dark background. So let's proceed. Here I am in Photoshop, and I'm just going to bring this panel over here so you can see it better. I've enlarged these thumbnail previews of the layers by going here and selecting panel options because it just makes it easier on the video, but it's a great trick for people who are looking at long layered files to be able to see what's in the layers. Okay, so here's the deal. Here is the smoke layer. I've borrowed this photograph of obviously our famous man, the poet, writer, and prolific drinker, Ernest Hemingway by Joseph Karsh, just to make this point. And here's a photograph of smoke made on black, and this is how you would need your smoke to look. The way it works is you start by trying the blending modes, and the ones that work best immediately to ignore the black background are lighten, screen, and sometimes color dodge, although far less likely. Overlay can also work, and soft light, but the problem with those is that they actually are creating too much transparency on the smoke. However, know that they're useful in some conditions. Let's look at lighten because it's the one that works best if the pixels on the smoke layer are lighter than the pixels of the background layer. And you can see that sometimes that doesn't work well. But what I do if I've had to use this technique is simply mask out the areas that don't blend well. So that's the quickest way to get to this end. The lighten blend mode, and then opacity when you want to reduce the opacity of that smoke so you can see more of the underlying layer. Two very simple things. Now here's where it gets even more interesting. I'm going to use this layer of a cloud. I'm going to turn this one off. I'm going to use this layer of a cloud because here's a situation where we don't have a black background, and of course, yes, we could desaturate this and create that, and that would help a lot, but the background doesn't have quite the density of a pure black background. So just to put things on an even scale, I'm going to say here's a typical situation where you might need to overlay one photograph onto another, and as long as there's good separation between the part that you want to keep and the part you don't want to see, this should work. And this is called advanced blending modes. Now, of course, I could go back to lighten and I could reduce opacity, but see, that background is not that dark. And I'm going to go back to normal here just so we can talk about another thing. Now, if I was to call up one of these adjustment layers, like curves, sure, I could darken that background to make more of a contrast between the cloud and its sky. And if I use this clipping tool, it will not harm the layer below it or affect the layer below it. So these layer effects are really awesome for that purpose. Just putting that out there so that that's part of your workflow if you need it. I'm going to go back to our layer. There is the mode that I just used, and I'm going to turn it off just because my point here is to show you the advanced blending modes. And these are something that you've probably run across accidentally in Photoshop when trying to rename a layer and accidentally double-clicking the layer. And you get this layer style panel, which has a hell of a lot of information in it. None of it explained very well until you start playing with it by either pure experimentation or having read some kind of a tutorial. So here's what it does. There's a lot of things you can do here, and this is the one-stop shop for anything that you're doing to a layer that is non-destructive, other than masking, of course. So yes, we have our regular layer blend modes here. Lighten is one of them, and of course our layer opacity. So it's nice that you can access that from within this layer style dialog. But here's where the good stuff happens, and this is what I want to bring to your attention. Blend if. This has been in Photoshop since a very long time ago, probably back in the 90s. And the way it works is you can split the tones so that the darker tones become transparent or the lighter tones become transparent of the layer that you're actually working on. You also have control of the underlying layer, but that's a bit more difficult to demonstrate using these particular layers, so I'm going to ignore that part and just show you the good thing here. The way this works is, this is your tonal scale of gray. It goes from 0 to 255, 255 being white. That's why this number is here. All this is doing is it's saying, oh, I want to clip out the highlights, and as you move this slider inwards, it clips out all the whites. So that's not immediately useful in this particular demo, but I needed to show you how it works. The beauty comes from when you hold down your Option or Alt key on a PC, Option on a Mac, and you split this triangle so that you have finer control of which tones in the highlight areas become transparent. Now we're going to apply that idea to the background where the sky shows in this cloud photo. So yes, I can grab this forward and move it toward the center, and it starts to erase or make transparent all those blue pixels. And that's good to a point, but you can see where it hardens the edges of the clouds, and it doesn't quite remove enough of them. So I'm going to stop at this point, and now I'm going to split that triangle with the Option key on a Mac or Alt on a PC, and now I can start to really nuance those tones that are left over while doing the blend. And now you can lower the opacity of that cloud, or you could even see what happens when you go to lighten mode. It may or may not improve because part of the mathematics that go into these layer blend modes has now been added here. Right? This is doing what the lighten blend mode does, but it does it a little bit more fine-tuned than just a grab and drop like these layer modes. So what I recommend is trying this out and finding how it works in your workflow. Guaranteed that you'll find a way that you can get the effects you want when you're trying to put something light on something else and ignore the background. I'll just add this one other thing. Sometimes I take scans or snapshots of old engravings from old books, things that are in public domain, and I use them in my illustrations, such as an engineering diagram or the line art drawing of a plant from a scientific journal. When I put those layers on top, of course, I've got black lines on a white piece of paper, and in those conditions, these sliders really work well to drop out all the white, especially if I've got this in overlay or multiply mode or darken mode, which of course does the opposite of what lighten mode would do, because what it's going to do is ignore the white and let the black lines show through. So even though I'm not demonstrating that, that's just a little bit of FYI and how I use these. And now I'm going to say OK, and we're back on our layer, and I can do anything I need to from here with opacity or masking. If I needed to remove this cloud, for instance, right here, I would just grab a mask, make sure I grab my brush here, the letter B. I can use the letter D to always turn black to the foreground color, and make sure that I've got some opacity here, a little bit out of picture, but you get the idea. And I can always take away any part of that cloud I don't want. So total control, and that's what we like in Photoshop. That's it. Thanks for watching. I hope it works for you. Cheers.